Wow, full, wonderful. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very happy to be here. My only apology is that I don't speak Spanish, but I hope that via translation, body language, slides, the message will be passed clearly to all of you, and I hope it will be enjoyable for all of us. It's my second visit to Chile, and I really enjoy your country immensely. In the previous time I was in the south of Chile, now I'm in the north of Chile, and it's a really magnificent country. So what I want to discuss with you today is the future of medicine, where we are heading in medicine, and mostly the big revolution that we have already started to take, and that's the revolution of personalized medicine. What is personalized medicine? Why revolution? Why now? What is the price that we are going to pay for it? So let's just start the journey. Can I get the first slide? Or? Oh, okay, great. So this is my city. It's a beautiful city like Antofagasta. It's on the sea. It's called Haifa. It's on the Mediterranean Sea, about 25 hours flight from here, not too far, half the globe. And this is the medical school where I am. It's part of a big university called the Technion. It's a technological university, one of the world-renowned technological university, but the medical school is next to the hospital. There is a huge medical complex here. What you see here is beautiful gardens and temple built by the Baha'i. The Baha'i came from Iran. They were persecuted by the Iranians, and at the beginning of the 20th century, they brought the founders to be buried in Israel, and they built beautiful gardens around the burial place, and it became a UNESCO heritage site. So the city is really beautiful. It's the mountain here and the sea. It's really a beautiful place. I was born there some few years ago. Okay, so what about life? We all want to stay young forever. Nobody wants to move in age. And obviously at the same time, we want also to stay healthy. So we have two demands from God, or whoever God is: not getting old and not getting sick. And the question is, which of the two is possible? Either one of them, none of them, and what medicine can do about it. And medicine and science, it's not only medicine, can do quite a lot about it. Think about 100 years ago, just 100 years ago. At the turn of the 20th century, the average lifespan in what we called at that time the industrial countries, England, France, maybe Germany, Europe, the lifespan was about 50 years, 55 years. People on the average, just merely 110, 120 years ago, lived about 50, 55 years. There was no antibiotics. People died of infections. Farmers died in the field because of tetanus and simple infections. Women died during delivery of bleeding. We didn't know the art of blood transfusion. We didn't know that there are blood types. People had big families of 10 kids because many of the kids died during delivery and during young age, and the kids were used as working power in the family. Now things have changed dramatically. In one single century, we were able to extend lifespan by about 30 years. We are now living on the average in the OECD countries, 80, 85 years. Japan is leading, but the rest of the developed world is not lagging much behind. Women live around 84 years, men 82, 81. So we extended lifespan by 30 years. If you go back 4,000 years ago, you go back to the Greek times and to the Roman times, the average lifespan was about 30 years. So, of course, Socrates and Hippocrates and Archimedes and the kings of Egypt, they lived a little bit, some of them lived longer, but the average lifespan in old Egypt and old Rome and old Greece was 30 to 35 years. So along 4,000 years, people managed somehow to extend lifespan by 20 years, from 30 to 50. And then in one single century, we are able to make much more than the whole human race was able to make in 4,000 years. In the 20th magic century, we extended life by 30 years, almost 1.5 times more than what occurred in 4,000 years. What is it about the 20th century? Science, technology, and education. No other word. It's antibiotics, it's vaccinations, it's X-ray that started at the beginning of the century. Wilhelm Conrad Röntgen, the first Nobel Prize in physics in 1901. It's sewage system, understanding diet, sport, all kinds of technologies that helped us together to become healthier, to understand better ourselves, and to improve our life and our health. It's really amazing. Think about it. People kind of not looking vertically into the history. But then came a price. We are paying a price for living longer. I don't know anybody that is not ready to pay the price, but we are paying a price for living longer, and the price are modern world diseases. If you ask people about cancer, yes, there was cancer 100 years ago. But it was very rare, because cancer is a bona fide age-related disease. There is cancer in children, but it's very rare. 2% of all cancers are occurring at the age of 20, 30, and 40. But then the slope takes up in a very steep manner. Cancer is an age-dependent disease. Heart diseases. We don't see people with a heart attack at the age of 20 or 30. Very rarely. It's an age-dependent disease. Brain diseases, Alzheimer, Parkinson, dementia. These are age-dependent diseases. The more we age, the more years we accumulate, the more prone we are and susceptible we are to diseases. If you walk to an average hospital in a Western country, I know for sure, in Chile too, you walk to an average hospital, 90% of the patient will belong to one of those diseases. Metabolic diseases, diabetes, heart diseases, brain diseases, cancer, 90% of them. Not only that, but the economists are calculating that in the last 3 to 4 years of our lives, we are spending 85% of the total health expenses that we are spending throughout our whole life. During our life, we don't spend a lot on health. Here and there, some antibiotics, some shots for flu in the winter, nothing. I myself, I'm almost 70 years old. I spend zero on health. Almost zero. Here and there something. But once it comes to the end, 85 to 90% of the expenses. Which raises also a lot of issues, of moral issues, what society should invest in, whether it's worthwhile or not worthwhile, but we shall touch these bioethical issues a little bit later. So you see that with age comes a price. The price is on our health, and the price is also economic on our society. Now, what medicine is doing about it? What science is doing about it? Medicine is moving in several parallel, though intertalking directions. One direction is obviously devices, engineering. Engineering has become a very important part of medicine. We are developing valves to the heart. We are developing artificial joints from titanium, from metals. We are developing little cameras that go in the body and can diagnose. We have drills. We can go to the heart and open occlusions in the vessels in the heart. We are developing very sophisticated imaging, not only X-ray, that is gun basically, but CT scan, CAT scan, and MRI. And with MRI, we can detect not only looking into the body, but we can look into processes. I can give a woman and a man an exercise in mathematics, like asking them how much is 2 times 2, and follow how the brain is working. And it's interesting. Men and women think very differently on the same very question. So we have very sophisticated imaging systems. It's all come from engineering, artificial organs, cameras, imaging. So engineering and devices is one direction of medicine. Another direction of medicine is what we call stem cell or regenerative medicine. We are replacing organs. We don't have a heart, the heart doesn't function. We are generating an artificial heart and we put it in. Or we take transplant. We know how to do transplant. But the modern medicine will be able to generate true heart that is made of true cells from stem cells. We can take embryonic cells and reprogram them so they will function like a heart. The Japanese just finished an experiment. There is a very common disease which is the main reason of blindness in the old age. It's called AMD, or age-related macular dystrophy. It doesn't matter. I will use very little jargon here. That people become blind. Old people become blind. So the Japanese took cells and they reprogrammed them so they can become visual cells, and they put them in the eyes of an aged woman that became blind, and all of a sudden the vision started to improve. So we are able to take cells and to reprogram them to become very specific functioning tissue, which is really amazing. You can imagine that, if I lose my hand, somebody will be able to make a true hand back. We call it regenerative medicine. And in some diseases, we are coming very close. Take, for example, a disease, very common disease in Chile, everywhere in the world, diabetes. What happens in diabetes? The sugar goes up because the sugar cannot go into the cells. We are missing something, a hormone that is called insulin. So we can take cells and make them now secrete insulin and put them underneath the skin, we are cured. Think about another disease like Parkinson, where we are losing our stability. In Parkinson's disease, think about me, we are thinking very simply about ourselves because we don't pay attention to the normal life. Just the fact that you are sitting nicely in your chair and I'm standing in front of you stable and I'm not trembling shouldn't be taken for granted. Why I don't tremble? Because in my body and in your body there is a balance between stimulation and inhibition that set the system stable. But you can imagine that if the brakes of this car are broken, then I will start to shake because the car will accelerate. So that's what happens to people with Parkinson. The balance between the brake and the gas in the car is being disordered. And the patients are entering an imbalancing state where there are no brakes and they tremble. They cannot button their shirt. They cannot dry themselves after the shower. They cannot cut their food. Why is it? Again, because we are losing some cells. So we are able to take cells now, to reprogram them to become again brakes. You can imagine the car, put them back into the brain, and we shall be able, I believe, shortly, to cure Parkinson's disease. So second direction of medicine is regenerative medicine. And the third direction, which I'm going to talk about mostly today, are drugs. Going to the pharmacy, taking a drug from the shelf, and treating the disease. So we shall focus mostly on drug development. What is in drug development? Now, drug development is awfully complicated. It's very complicated. It's an art. well, it's a scientific art that was developed mostly in the 20th century. It's an art of the 20th century, and it was developed mostly because of communication. Think about our world. The world is really built on media and communication because we are able to communicate information very quickly. So in order to bring a drug to the market, we need to know that this drug is better than the current drug, because otherwise why to do it? So how do we do it? We do it by communication. We are trying the drug in different hospitals, in different medical centers in the world. And then the centers communicate among themselves and compare the results. And the people that make the experiment don't know what they give to the patient. Some patients are given the old drug. Some patients are being given the new drug. And the effects are being recorded. And only at the end of the experiment, the envelopes are opened, and then we know who got what. So it became a multi-billion-dollar industry that requires huge amount of coordination and collaboration among countries and among medical centers. And to bring a drug to the market these days is very expensive, and we shall talk about the cost of the revolution a little bit later. But I can give you a number. The number of bringing a new drug to the market today runs around $5 billion, more or less. It can run from $3 to $8 billion. It's a huge amount of money. And the companies are very concerned that this is an issue that we are going to discuss a little bit later. So let's move a little bit with the drug industry. And the drug industry didn't start like that. So I think that it's always very helpful to go a little bit back in history and to understand how did we get to this revolution and why did we get to this revolution at this particular point of time. So let's go to the first revolution. We call it the third revolution now. The revolution of personalized medicine is being called or nicknamed the third revolution. So what was the first revolution? Actually, the first revolution was not a revolution. It was incidental discovery. Drugs were discovered by complete coincidence. And I'll tell you just one story about a drug that is called aspirin. It's a very famous drug. I'm sure that all of you know about it. Yes? Anybody heard aspirin? You know what is aspirin? Yes, you know what is aspirin. I'm sure that some of you even take aspirin. And aspirin is actually an old Egyptian drug. It was discovered by the Egyptians about 4,000 years ago. On the Nile River, the willow barks, the Egyptians noted that if they chew it, it has a very bitter taste. But at the same time, it can take pain away. And they recorded it. We have old writings from the Egyptians from 4,000 years ago that chewing the leaves of the willow barks that grew on the banks of the Nile River is very bitter, hardly can be tolerated, but nevertheless can alleviate pain. It took 4,000 years until some French and German scientists isolated the material, the bitter material, it's called salicin, and then they realized that it's useless. They cannot do anything. People cannot tolerate it. It's so bitter that they cannot just eat it. So they did some chemical modification, and they took the bitterness away, but nevertheless, the pain alleviating characteristics remained. And some of these scientists worked in a German company called Bayer. It's a big pharmaceutical company in Germany. And they told Bayer, let's make it. Let's make the drug. As a drug to alleviate pain. And Bayer indeed started to make the drug. And for many years it was used to take pain, to take fever away. And then, all of a sudden, we approached the end of the 20th century. We jumped decades ahead of time, and two things were discovered. One, that aspirin can also prevent blood clotting, our blood clots. If I wound myself, I don't bleed to death. We have a protective mechanism that will clot the blood and will not let us die of profuse hemorrhage. And blood clotting is a problem when you have a heart attack. Heart attack is caused by blood clotting inside the heart itself, in the blood vessels that bring blood to the heart itself. So people discovered that if people that had heart attack are being given aspirin after the heart attack, then they can prevent the second heart attack from occurring. And as you all know, heart attack is a very, very common disease, and aspirin became the #1 drug to prevent a second heart attack. Now we are crossing the border. We are moving just behind ourselves to the beginning of the 21st century. Nearly 10 years ago, another miracle was discovered about aspirin. And remember, nobody invested almost a penny in the development of aspirin. It was there. Bayer produced it 100 years ago. It was discovered by the Egyptian, not $1 billion, not $1 million, not $1,000, no nothing. Complete coincidence. People discovered a very tight connection between inflammation and cancer. This looks to you very strange, but many of us have inflammation that we don't see it. It's going underneath, in the liver, in the breast, in the intestine. We call it subclinical inflammation. We can detect it in the blood if we are doing the right test, but we ourselves are not aware of it. And this chronic inflammation is the main cause of many cancers. Among them, breast cancer. And cancer also of the intestine. So it turns out that aspirin has not only anti-pain ability and anticoagulation ability, but also anti-inflammatory ability. It can prevent inflammation. And by preventing inflammation, it can prevent also cancer. And aspirin has become #1 drug in the world to prevent cancer for people who are thought by their doctors to be susceptible. There was a huge experiment in the United States about prevention of cancer of the intestine, and the data, the results were so clear that the experiment was cut in the middle. There was no need to go with the experiment all the way to the end. It was clear that aspirin, if being taken for 3 years in a very small dose, it's called baby aspirin, can prevent cancer of the intestine, which is very common, by almost 30%. It cut it down. Amazing. So aspirin came to us for free. So this was the first revolution, what I called coincidence. No research, no university, no nothing. The second revolution, before I come to the third revolution, is the revolution of high throughput, brute force. What is it? The industry and the knowledge in chemistry has expanded in the last few decades. Huge amount of knowledge. And the chemists know to synthesize many compounds. And they do it. All the time they make all kinds of compounds and they try them, and there are millions of compounds. So this is one side. On the other side, biologists developed very good models for diseases. We can now imitate disease in the test tube by growing cells. You know, we can take cells from cancer patients and grow them in the dish. You come to my laboratory in Israel, the incubator is full with cancer patient samples. Full. We have hundreds of samples of cancer cells growing in our laboratory. So on one hand you have chemicals, on the other hand you have disease models. It's not only cancer. You can have cells that make cholesterol, that can imitate the heart, and so on and so forth. So people said, why not to combine the two? We don't need to think of a mechanism. Let's just combine the two. We shall take a disease, we shall take dish with cancer cells, and we shall put one chemical, and we shall see maybe it has an effect. It will slow down the cancer. If not, we shall put the second one. If not, we shall put the third one, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth. Now, you don't do it like that. If you go to big pharmaceutical company, to Johnson & Johnson, to Novartis, to Sanofi, you will see robots. So the robots are going into the chemical store. They take hundreds of samples of chemicals. They go to the cells. They put it in. We let the cell grow. The cells are going to the microscope. The microscope look at them. It's all artificial intelligence software that tell us the drug number 1,500,999 can stop cancer. It's not a drug yet. It's the first step. It's a screening. And then we take this drug and we improve it and we make experiments on people. It takes a lot of time, but the screening, the first discovery, is just by matching two different worlds, the worlds of chemistry and the worlds of biology, by very sophisticated industry that can match them together. There is no mechanism behind, we don't know anything. It's like we try. Let's think about something simple. In the evening, we go to the theater. We come here in Antofagasta to the theater. And we forgot the key at home. We cannot go back home. What do? We bring some expert that comes with 1,000 keys. That was the old days, and he tries them one by one, and one key will open the door of our home. Why? Because the company makes only 500 or 1,000 keys. But they sell it all over the place, so the chances that my neighbor and me will have the same key are very low. The same for nature. We don't know anything about the chemicals and the disease. But we say that even in nature, the number of possibilities is limited. So if we take million compounds and try them one by one by chance will fit. That's the whole idea. It's exactly the key issue. That even God made limited numbers of keys to diseases. That's the whole idea. So the second revolution is the revolution of screening of chemicals. And I give you just one example before I jump to the subject, and that's statins. Statins are drugs to reduce cholesterol. Many people. It's a multi-billion-dollar selling drugs. What happens in heart attack? Now I go back to heart attack that we talked. You see, this is the patient that has heart attack, is going to die. Hopefully not. And that's what's happening in the heart. You see, this is the vessel, the blood vessel that go to the heart. And you see here that something grows, a lipid layer, cholesterol, occludes it. Think about the pipelines that bring water to your home. Along the years, they become rusty. So rust goes in, and at the end of the day, the whole pipe is occluded. There is no water flow because everything is occluded with calcium and rust and all kinds of things. That's exactly what happened to us. You see, now here, blood can still flow, but here, not. And it grows and grows and grows and grows, and at the end, no blood. And that's heart attack. Statins can prevent this from happening. They reduce the level of cholesterol. How statins were discovered? Exactly by the mechanism that I told you. Akira Endo, a Japanese scientist, had a collection. In his case, it was 10,000 chemicals from Japan that he collected from different plants. And he tried them one by one on cholesterol. And he found one. This was in 1970, not too long ago, only 47 years ago. And then the first drug was further developed by Merck and other companies. And towards the end of 1970, the first statin showed up in the market. And now it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Millions and millions and millions of people over the world are having statins daily to reduce their cholesterol and to reduce the risk of heart attack. So that's the second revolution, screening. Now, into the subject, the third revolution of personalized medicine. And remember, It's not only personalized, actually it's 4 P's. It's personalized or precision, because everything that is personal must be precise. It's for me, not for you. It's also predictive. It can predict the future. We shall talk about it. It can prevent diseases, because if I can predict, I can prevent, right? Think about our behavior. If I don't cross the street when the car is coming, if I predict that the car is coming, I see it, I can prevent me being running over by the car. Very simple. And then the most important part, or a very important part, it is participatory. The patient has also to take responsibility for making up a decision. So remember, 4 P's, or 5. Personalized and precision, predictive, preventive, and participatory. Now, what is it? What was wrong until now? Why not screening? Okay, we understand that coincidence is not the way to go. We cannot rely on another aspirin to come by coincidence. Science cannot go by coincidence. But screening, okay, let's make a model for this disease and this disease and this disease and this disease. Having all the diseases as models, screen millions of compounds and find drug to all diseases. What's wrong with it? What's wrong with it is that the screening is being done on a model, but the patients are human beings. That's the problem. And human beings are very different from one another. We are men and women, right? Very different. We are tall and low. We live in Chile and we live in Japan. We eat different diet. We're exposed to different climate. And we are very different from one another genetically. We think we are similar because we have 2 eyes and 2 hands and 2 legs. But we are much more different from one another than we are similar. Think about blood. Okay, just blood. We cannot transfuse blood to one another. We have 8 different types of blood. We have A, we have B, we have O, and we have AB. And each of them has a plus and a minus, an RH, right? So it's 4 times 2. But that's nothing. That's simple blood. Think about kidney transplantation or bone marrow transplantation. No way in the world that we can match by transferring a kidney to one another or bone marrow. The chances are 1 to 1 million to 1 to 10 million. Now there are banks in the world that have all the information, and I can find, if I need a donor for a blood in Israel, I can go and find, actually there was one found in Chile recently, in Israel, which was just amazing how medicine and informatics is working. So people that volunteer to give a sample of the blood to have their DNA sequenced, and it's deposited in the bank, and then if somebody in Thailand or in Indonesia needs some blood or some, then we can match and find. But for that you need huge population, because the matching is 1 to 1 million or 1 to 10 million, just to show you how different we are. So no wonder that the disease, any disease, behaves very differently in each and every one of us. Until 10 years ago, only 10 years ago, we are talking really current, present. When I am a physician, I am a surgeon. When I studied medicine 35 years ago, 40 years ago, nothing of that was known. 0. There was breast cancer. Yeah, breast cancer. You go to the operating theater, you take the breast away, you irradiate the patient, that's it. 1 disease, breast cancer. 1 disease, heart attack. 1 disease, prostate cancer. 1, that's it. Gold standard treatment, 1 treatment. That's it. Very simple world. But then we realized that the diseases behave very differently in every one of us. Think about this picture. Very simple picture. We have a group of patients. Okay? There are green patients and blue patients and orange patients. And the same day, what is today? Today is Saturday, April 8, 2000. 17. Well, Saturday all the world is shut down. There are no clinics. But let's talk Monday, okay? Monday morning. In the clinic of breast cancer in Santiago, Chile, or in Jerusalem, Israel, or in Paris, France, there will be several women walk in that will tell the doctor that yesterday when they took a shower, they had feeling that they have some lump in their breast. Or a man will walk in and tell the doctor, you know, I find it very difficult to urinate. I have some problems in urinating. Maybe the prostate pressurizes. Or I have headache, or I have anything. Doesn't matter. And at the same day, a diagnosis is made. You can imagine how many breast cancers are diagnosed daily. I can give you just the numbers in Israel. It's an amazing disease. It's called, the disease as a nickname, breast cancer. It's called 1 to 8 or 1 to 9 because every one of 8 or 9 women will at the end contract breast cancer. It doesn't mean she'll die, absolutely not. We are doing very well on breast cancer. And the same prostate. I mean, the numbers are staggering. So we have a group of patients that was diagnosed at the same day, breast cancer, prostate cancer, and then we started treatment, until recently. And we start to follow them. So here is the beginning point, and we follow them. After 5 years, the green group is healthy. We cured them. Well, it depends on the disease. If unfortunately they had brain cancer, they are all dead. But it depends on the disease. But let's take a disease that is balanced. But the blue one and the orange one are not cured. They are either sick or even more worse. Their situation has been worsened or they died. So the group that started on day one, once followed for 5 years, splits. Some are cured, some are still sick and even worsening or just become chronic, and some unfortunately passed away. Now, medicine until recently lacked two abilities. One ability is to predict who belongs to which one. Unfortunately, patients are not colored when they walk into the clinic. That's only for the slide presentation. We don't know their color. When we start the treatment, we don't know how they're going to behave. So medicine lacked two abilities. One, to predict who will be here and who will be here. And the other one is to treat those patients accordingly, because we have one standard treatment. The reason that they behave like that is not only because they are diagnosed at different times and at different stages of the disease, but because fundamentally these are different people. And we didn't appreciate this difference, not because we were stupid, not we, I mean big, because we didn't have tools for prediction. We didn't know what to do. When I studied medicine in the 70s, no tools, no DNA, no genetics, no nothing. Now you can imagine a situation of a woman or a man in the clinic that she was just diagnosed, or he was just diagnosed, and he asked the doctor, "Doctor, am I going to be with my family in 5 years? Am I going to survive the disease?" And the doctor tells him or her, 50%. 50% you die, 50% you survive. The patient asks the doctor, "How do you know?" The doctor tells him, "You know, I'm 70 years old. I've been sitting in this clinic for the last 40 years. I've seen 2,000 like you. And the statistics is that 1,000 are alive and 1,000 are dead." But then the patient tells the doctor, "Doctor, you know, I'm not a statistics. I am a person. I have a name. I have a family. I have an address. I have an ID card with a number. I'm an entity. Am I going to make it?" And the doctor tells him, "I don't know. I don't know. I don't have a tool to tell you. We have to wait and see. We shall start the treatment and we shall wait and see." This is not good enough for the patient. He goes home with a big question mark hanged above his head. And mostly, it's not good enough for science. Not knowing is not an answer in science. It's not good for medicine, it's not good for science, it's not good for the people, it's not good. And only nowadays, science has evolved good enough tools to get out of this predicting conundrum and to be able to start to predict the fate of the patient and accordingly also to develop drugs. And the revolution, I cannot tell you when it started or ended, because it's not ended, but I think that there is two dates. One date is in the mid-90s, about 20 years ago, when in the United States people took the decision at the NIH, the National Institute of Health, to sequence the human DNA, to read ourselves, to read the information that makes us what we are. And the basic information is the DNA. It's only the basic. It's not the whole information. It was a huge project. It took 7 years to do one DNA sequence of one person, of Craig Venter. And it took almost $1 billion. $1 billion, one person, 7 years. From 1993, yes, to 2000, to April of 2000. This is not a medical device. We cannot sequence, we cannot diagnose people along 7 years with $1 billion. But see what happened in the last 15 years. The same technology has been shrunken to an ability that we shall be able to do the same thing now in about 2 hours in the cost of about less than $10,000, and the price in 2 or 3 years will get down to less than $1,000 in about half an hour, and it will be done on the doctor's desk in the office. The technology changed dramatically. I will not go into it changed from chemistry to electrochemistry. I don't want to go into it. And mostly the ability of computing to process the data. We are built of 3 billion pieces of information, 3 billion pieces of information. It's called letters of DNA, doesn't matter what it is. And we are able to read the 3 billion letters in few hours, in $5,000, and get all the information processed in few minutes. And we are going down sharply. And in 2 to 3 years, it will be a technique that will be available to every doctor in the clinic on the table. It gives us the ability to read what makes us. But it's only the beginning. It's not that simple, because DNA is only the beginning. On top of DNA, there are other layers. There is RNA and proteins and changes in the proteins. I don't want to go into it. But in parallel, you can imagine that technology always pushes technology. Think about the space technology, that America, the first launching of men to the space. Actually, the Russians were the first with Yuri Gagarin, but then they somehow fell back and the Americans took over. It pushed the computing industry, you know, from the big computer to the small computer to the desktop to the smartphone. You know, the need always, you know, and the technology doesn't know limits, because then you take one technology and you move it to something else. So the computing technology really pushed biology in an unbelievable way to the ability to process the data and to look into them. And we are able nowadays to really look into the library that has the secret of what we are. And there are many cartoons about it. You can see it, the future drugs analyzing new medicine will be based on DNA. You can see here a naive story of Adam and Eve in paradise, surrounded by the double helix of the DNA. It's all surrounding the DNA. And the ability of the DNA and the layers above it to give us information is basically endless. It's not infinite, it's not 100% defined, but it gives us the ability to really do a very precise diagnosis. And let me give you just one example. I just want to show you one example, and that's breast cancer. I'm studying breast cancer, so you forgive me for being biased, but it can be any common disease. So now let's talk business. Let's just talk business. You have here 2 biopsies, 2 women. On the left side you have woman A, and on the right side you have woman B. Two women that walked into the clinic and said, doctor, when I took a shower I felt a lump in my breast, or they just went to a routine testing, annual test. You see the cancer. This is the cancer here. You see the cancer in the breast? We put a needle in, we take a biopsy, and we put it under the microscope. We manipulate it a little bit. So you see here the cancer. And here you see the islands of cancer. You see many islands of cancer. So woman A, woman B. Now you see that the cancer here is more brown than here, right? Because we manipulated it. We manipulated the two samples at the same time. We put an antibody, some diagnostic tool, which is an anti-estrogen receptor. We wanted to know what's going on with the two women. So you see that the antibody that we used to detect mutation, malfunctioning DNA, stained this woman with brown but didn't stain this woman. So this woman has something that this woman doesn't have. Remember, they too have breast cancer. That until 10, 20 years ago, it's breast cancer. That's it. Nothing more to add. Breast cancer, period. Now this woman now has something that this woman doesn't have. We know what she has. She has a mutation in the estrogen receptor that drives the breast cancer. Therefore, this woman can be treated with tamoxifen. This is a drug that treats mutation, specific mutation in the estrogen receptor. Now, treating this woman with tamoxifen will be a waste. She doesn't have this mutation. She has another mutation. Treating this woman with tamoxifen will be a waste of money and a waste of hope and useless. Of course. Why to do it? But treating this woman will cure her or will improve her. Now let's go to another woman. This woman has a mutation in another receptor, in another molecule. Don't remember names. Forget about jargon. She has a mutation in the EGF receptor. You see here, the EGF, the HER2. It's another molecule. So the both women has a breast cancer, but the driving force behind the cancer is different. Think about a simple metaphor. You're coming in the morning to your car and you want to turn it on and it doesn't turn on. This is the disease. This is the breast cancer. The car doesn't turn on. But the reason can be numerous. The battery is empty. The sparks are wet from the rain. There is no gas in the gas tank because you were forgetful and didn't fill gas in the gas tank. You lost oil and the cylinders are stuck in the holes and they cannot move. So the reasons for the fact that you cannot turn on your car in the morning can be multiple. The same for cancer, the same for any disease. The driving mechanisms of diseases are vastly different from one another. And therefore, no wonder that the diseases are behaving differently in each and every one of us. For one, the cancer is more aggressive. For one, it's less aggressive. For one, it sends metastasis. For the other, it doesn't. For one, it does this. For other, it does that. Very different. And therefore, we need to do it precisely. We need to identify the mutation. And then there is a third woman that has a mutation in the progesterone receptor. So we have one with estrogen, one with progesterone, one with EGF, and then there is the fourth woman that actually belongs to a big group that we call triple negative. She doesn't have A, and she doesn't have B, neither does she have C. So, and now we know that this woman, the fourth one, in the very near future, will belong to another 15 different classes. We start now to map it. And we know that at the end of the road, there will not be 3 breast cancer, but there will be something between 15 and 20 different diseases. And each of them will have to be treated differently by a different drug or a combination of drugs. So that's the premise behind, that's the reason behind, and the achievement of sequencing the DNA and the computing and the ability to process big data all came together to help us enter this revolution. So we are going to be very precise. At the same time, there are the other 3 Ps. And the other 3 Ps, the predictive, Well, the preventive is less so, but the predictive and the participatory belong to the last part of my talk that I want to devote the last few minutes to, and that's the bioethical issue. You know, in science, scientists are very weird species of people. They investigate nature. And it doesn't matter whether it occurs in Chile, in Ecuador, in Europe, somewhere in Asia, in America, it doesn't matter. We are fact finders. We are finding facts. And we put the facts on the table. What people are doing with the facts, what governments are doing with the facts, it's something completely else. Some governments don't believe in science at all. They don't invest in science. Some governments believe that others will do the science and they will enjoy the result. It doesn't matter. I'm not judgmental at all. But scientists are fact finders. And the rest is up to the people. And up to the people means their tradition, their culture, their history, their religion, their budget, whatever makes us a society. What we do with the facts. And in this revolution, the bioethical issues are humongous, are really humongous. And I just want to give you a glimpse. There are technical issues here. I was very oversimplifying that, okay, we'll know the mutation and we'll develop a drug. It's not that simple because there are some diseases that have many mutations, mostly psychiatric diseases, which are really a big issue. Depression, autism, all kinds of personality disorders are big issues, and they are driven by many genes, by many mutations, and we don't know who is the driver and who is the hitchhiker. But forget about it. Science will solve it. That's technical. But one issue is price. Is personalized medicine going, besides being better, of course, going to be more pricey? And unfortunately, I think that the answer is yes. Unfortunately, I say it because it may not be available to whom we believe it should be available. Well, we are all human beings and we believe that we all have the same rights. We were born to the same God. We are all sons of God or whoever God is. But the reality of life is the reality of life. The rich can have more. When you have social health system like in Israel or in many developed countries, it's limited, so because government cannot provide with everything. Technologies are extremely expensive, MRI and CAT scan, and there are not enough experts, enough surgeons, and enough experts in radiology and so on. So medicine is always, even with with good public medicine, and I'm living in a country with a superb public medicine, many problems. Many problems. We have to decide what yes and what not, which drug should be under the insurance, which drug should not be under the insurance. It's awfully complicated. But this is going to be much more expensive. Because you can imagine now the following situation. Let's say cholesterol, okay? Let's move from cancer away. There is now one drug for cholesterol, basically one and a quarter, but one major drug, the one that I showed you, statins. Now, statins are helping part of the people, but not all of them. As I said, the disease is not caused by the same reason. So statin will help to some that their disease is related to the statin mechanism, but it will not help the others. Or it may help them a little bit. But let's say you are a patient, and statin helps you a little bit. You say to yourself, well, a little bit is also something, I'll do it. I go to the pharmacy every month, I give $100 to the pharmacist, and I take the drug. Once you gave $100 to the pharmacist, that's it. It's go to the company. So many people are doing it because they say this is the only thing I can do, even if it's little. I don't know what's little. We'll do it. There is only one monopoly in the market. Now you can imagine that tomorrow there will be 10 different reasons for high cholesterol. And there will be 10 different drugs. Statins will lose their royalty. They will not be the kings anymore. Now statins are being sold for $15 billion a year because it's the only drug in the market and people take it even if they don't need it. Tomorrow there will be 10 different reasons for cholesterol. There will be statin, and there will be drug A, and drug B, and drug C, and drug D. And statin, instead of being sold for $15 billion, will be sold for $1 billion. And the other drugs will not be developed necessarily by the same company. So the companies are against it. If you talk to the company about personalized medicine, they say, forget about it. We are not in the business. And the companies are very strong. You know in Chile how strong are the mining companies. They have a big say. They control the politicians if they want. So this is one big issue. It's going to be very expensive because the share market of each drug is going to drop. And the companies will have to invest much more in developing, and they are not interested. Drug industry, unlike education and defense, is not a government issue. It's a private issue. Companies have shares, they have CEO, they have board, and the only thing that the board wants to see is the share going up. That's the only thing that they are interested. They want the Merck share and the Johnson & Johnson share. If this year it's $100, next year they want it to be $120. They don't care about your health. It's not a charity organization, it's not a church, it's not your rabbi, it's not your monk, it's not your nobody. They're not your friends. So this is one issue. But that's a business issue. But the other issue is a very personal issue. And the personal issue is, what do we want, or do we want at all to know anything about ourselves? Yeah, people will say, yes, I want to know about myself. They go to the psychologist, they blah blah in the afternoon, they pay him $100, whatever. But do we really want to know about our future diseases, about our mutations? Well, there is no answer to that, but this is a practical issue. And I want to give you examples. You know, it's not a matter of discussion between you and me because opinions vary, but let's talk now facts. And I'll give you 3 examples, and that will end the lecture. 3 short examples. One example I'll give you from, it's not a true story, but imaginary story. Me, in the afternoon, one afternoon, I feel that I have a chest pain. I have a pain in my chest. I go to the hospital, to the emergency room, and I want them to test me for a heart attack. Well, I am a doctor, so I know what it is, but let's say that a man at the age of 50 or 60 feels some chest pain, and he walks to the emergency room, and the typical complaint, I remember when I was a young doctor, I saw 30 like that every afternoon and evening. This was like the most common complaint I've seen in the emergency room. Chest pain. You need to rule out heart attack. So you do, at the old days we did ECG, we took some blood tests, and we told the patient, no, you don't have heart attack. You can go home. Or you do have heart attack. Small heart attack, we shall keep you in the hospital. Nowadays, it's going to be different. The blood sample will also go to DNA analysis. Routinely. We shall do DNA analysis on any patient that go into the hospital. Take it as a statement. This is true. And the doctor, after a few hours, will come to my bed in the emergency room, and he will tell me, Aaron, you know, you are okay. You don't have heart attack. But you have a mutation in a gene that will high probability, 80-90%, will cause you Alzheimer's disease in about 10 or 20 years. I'm already in the right age, so I'm ready for that. The gene has a name. It's not a joke. The gene is APOE4BA. We know that there is a gene, that there is a mutation in which that causes high probability of Alzheimer's. So I walk out of the emergency room, and I start to think about what did the doctor tell me? And what do I do with the information? Do I tell my wife? Okay, the first person that I'm going to meet now is my wife. I was on my way from my work to home. I had a chest pain. I went to the hospital. My medical school is just next by. And then I go home with a diagnosis of a mutation in APOE4BA. Well, I've been married for several decades. We have a nice son. I believe that my wife will stay with me. And she will take good care of me even if in few years I'm not going to be the same husband. But what do I tell my employer? Will my employer fire me because he knows that in few years I'm a problem? Well, I'm not asking you a question because there is no answer to that. But there is a piece of information that I know now. And whether I should hide it or not. What do I tell my insurance agent? For many years, for 20 years, I've paid my insurance policy every year. And I didn't take a penny from the insurance company. And now when I'm going to need them, if I tell them, the next year they are not going to renew my policy. Think about it. Let's just think about it. And most importantly, what do I tell my son? Because if he is a carrier of the gene, what does he tell his wife and his children? Because genes are going from generation to generation. So think about little diagnosis, little chest pain in the afternoon in the emergency room, what type of questions it brings up. Put this one away. Let's go to the second one. And then I'll bring you the last one. And then we'll try to wrap it up. A case that I took care of in Israel, a real case, of a woman of 45 years old that she had what we call a PKD. PKD is a polycystic kidney disease. It's a disease in which the kidney develops cyst and it lost its function. It loses its function. So she needed kidney transplant. She was on dialysis and she needed, this is a real case. She needed kidney transplant. The only one that was the closest matching one was her brother to give her the kidney. Now the brother, remember it's a true story, the brother knew about the disease and he escaped. But they knew where he is. He took his family, he just got married, the brother was much younger, he was 25 years old, and he escaped to southern Israel, to the Negev, to the desert, and isolated himself from the family. He wanted to forget about it. And he married, he had a small kid, and he started new life, out of the family. Now, the family reached him. And the question for him was a major one, whether he should do the test. Because if he does the test, he may have the same gene. If he has the same gene, he cannot give the kidney right away. He needs to go the test. If he has the same gene, he cannot give the kidney because in one day he will get the disease. If he doesn't have the gene, it's okay, then he can give the kidney. But think about it, for him, not giving the kidney, just the test, is like a Russian roulette. It's either he is dead because he has the gene, or he is alive and can help his sister. He knew about it. He was not stupid. It's a very well-founded, educated family. But all what he did is to escape the question. You know, from time to time we go away. We don't want to forget about it. But now he is forced on a time scale to give an answer. They came to him and they said, we want you to help your sister. He can still escape, but now it becomes really tight and heavy. And the end of the story was a happy end. He took the test, he was healthy, he didn't have the gene, that kidney was transplanted and everything. But think about the dilemma. What medicine can do. You know, we can test genes now. Beforehand we didn't know, we couldn't know what to do with him. He was not a source for the kidney. It was. And the last one is this one. Before I close off. This lady, Angelina Jolie, right? We are not going to talk about her problems with Brad Pitt and beating the kids and being drunk and all that. But Angelina Jolie, in March of 2013, came with an announcement that she's going to take her 2 breasts away. And she did it. And the reason was, and a year later, in August 2014, a year and plus later, she came with a similar announcement that she's going to take her ovaries away. Just think about it. Angelina Jolie, the ultimate woman, well, in the eyes of some people, not all of them. decides to really cut away her womanhood, if you think metaphorically. Breast and ovaries, out. Why? Because her mother died of breast cancer or was on to die, and her aunt, the sister of her mother, died of ovarian cancer. And she suspected that she's carrying a gene that is called BRCA1, BRCA1. Now we are talking business. My lecture is not in philosophy, it's on business. BRCA1, breast cancer number 1, that once it's mutated, it carries a high risk of breast cancer, 80%. 80%, it's almost 100%. And 40% risk for ovarian cancer, which is a deadly disease. Ovarian cancer is a different ballgame than breast cancer. And she decided to take a preemptive step and to remove a ticking bomb from her body. A mine that was on to explode. And she did it very courageously, and she decided also to make a public service, to announce it, to tell women, be careful, if you have something in the family, go and test yourself. But what she didn't do, well, in her case it's not relevant, in her particular case, again, what do you do with the children? What do you do if she had 4 daughters, one in high school, one just started college, one just married and have a first child? What do you tell the children? That a daughter of 16 years old that in high school will go and test for the gene, and if she found that she has the mutation, she take her breast away at the age of 6. What is it? So again, the same very problem that came up with my story, with my imaginary story about Alzheimer. It's the story of whether we want to know or don't want to know, or whether we are forced to know. Because she was forced to know, her mother died, her aunt died. Death was surrounding her. It was immensely coming. It's not a matter of choice anymore, of whether we want to know or don't want to know, or we want to hide. It's a life threat on her life. So let me end up with a happy note. Now, there is an old Jewish statement, an old Jewish say that says that the more knowledgeable you are, the more troubled you are. Because you think a lot, of course. If you are ignorant, you're illiterate, what do you know? The more knowledgeable we are, the more curious we are, the more troubled we are. So this is part of our life. I mean, we cannot escape it. And as I said, scientists are fact finders. They are not, we can help societies solve the problems or bring solutions, but it's not our job. We can participate. It's legislators and clergymen and sociologists and budget people and financiers and governments and culture and history and music and everything. It has to do with our society. It's not, the fact that I know that I have a mutation or doesn't know that I have a mutation it doesn't make any sense. The mutation doesn't care about me. Mutation is a mutation, it's a chemistry. They don't know about me, they don't know about my history, what do I do in the morning, fly to Chile, go back, do this, do that. You know, it's not a matter of being asked or not. It's irrelevant. Science and nature are irrelevant to the matter. It's a societal issue, but science is there to help. And I think that beside the need to have these questions floated and discussed, and I'm extremely happy with this meeting because I think that bringing science to the attention, to the knowledge, to the focus of the public is extremely important, not only because of curiosity, but because of engaging the people in the discussion. It's critically important. Who am I to decide for somebody? Who made me morally eligible to do it? Nobody. I'm exactly like you. So what? So I learned a little bit, some details. So what? But I think that science is coming with some solutions. It will be difficult, but it's coming. And there is now a technology which will probably win the Nobel Prize in the near future, which is called CRISPR-Cas. CRISPR-Cas. I will not go again into detail, but it's an ability to edit our genome. We can edit it. We can correct it. If we find a mutation, we can take the old gene out with the scissors, kick it out, and tailor in a healthy gene. So there is a solution behind the corner. It's not that we are helpless and we don't know what to do. There is a solution behind the corner. But the solution, like any solution, is also loaded with troubles, with problems. There is nothing easy in the world, and I think that this is the most nice thing about living, that there is nothing easy. Everything is challenging. Because by changing genes, we are already posing an issue of selecting people. You know, one mother will want her child to be a basketball player, and she will want him, that mother will want the child to be blonde, and that mother will want, or whatever. So the ability to manipulate ourselves is frightening, because so far we are the products of diversity, which is beautiful. You travel in the world, you see different people, but the ability to manipulate people is frightening. You may manipulate their mind, their opinions, their violence, their whatever. So you see, on one hand we had a solution, but on the other hand it also needs the society to regulate it. We cannot float freely and do what we like to do. We are not mice, that we can manipulate the color of the skin. But I believe, and this will be the last statement, that in moral societies, and mostly in democratic societies, and democracy is a very relative tool. There are all kinds of democracies in the world. There is America, but they have Guantanamo, and there is Israel with their problems, and you know, we know it. It's not a smooth definition. But I think that democracy is the most balanced way that we have checks and balances. We have parliaments, we have people, we have free press, we have media. You cannot do whatever you like to do. This is not totalitarian regime. We are not under communism or Cambodia, what used to be, and so on and so forth, or North Korea, that I happened to visit a year ago. We are living, most of us, in a free world and with all the balances. And I believe that at the end of the day, science, the ability of science, will be counterbalanced by our society, and something very good is up to come for all of us. Thank you very much.